Hey YouTube, time for a tool review. I've had this Drill Doctor for about a year now. It's a drill bit sharpener, and I figured I'd give it a review. It's not just a review, but it's also in response to some very strong criticism one way or another, whether the Drill Doctor is right for you. So I'm just going to lay it all out there and let you decide whether you would want this. Basically, the long story short is there's the people who don't know how to sharpen drill bits and don't have the manual dexterity to handle a bench grinder, or there's a type that know how to do it and think that this is a waste of money and time. Really, it's a balance of both, in my opinion. But without further ado, let's get into this. So when you get the tool, you have this case. It's pretty solid. It's got a room for a chuck and a spare one, as well as some grinding wheel storage. So here's the actual tool. We'll get into that in a bit. Manual, product card, and a DVD. I threw these in here, but I had them sitting in a drawer somewhere. I don't actually use these. I just have them in here for the review, as well as the wrench to tighten or loosen the grinding wheels. So this is the highest end consumer model that they have, and I'll just kind of go around the features real quick. This section here is how you align your drill bit. There's a port here that you can remove for vacuum dust collection. There's an adjustment here for material takeoff, MTO. And then there's an adjustable angle setting here. You can go from 118 to 135 degree point, depending on the kind of drill bit that you want. I guess one thing that I forgot to mention here about the side port is that you can also do split point sharpening with this, as well as masonry bits. I haven't tried it with masonry bits in all honesty, but might not be a bad thing to try for really expensive bits, right? Because trying to sharpen a carbide tipped masonry bit, you might just chip off the carbide on a bench grinder if you're not careful, but at least this jig allows you to control where everything is. So to actually set this up, you have a chuck, right? You have fingers on the inside, which as you tighten, they close in. Right, so in this case I'm going to loosen it almost all the way. This model apparently goes up to 3/4, but it feels like ½ inch is almost as big as it'll take. Anyways, you loosen it up, you get the drill bit loosely fitting in, then you just give it a slight tighten until it's held in. Just like that. Yeah, so this is it as tight as it'll go. You can't turn the drill bit. Give it a little loosen so you can adjust it. Then you have to insert it into this guide. Now, this is where a lot of people get confused or go wrong. You'll see here there's a minus and a plus, right? This is important. This actually controls the ratio between the cutting edge and the heel of the drill bit. Right? I found that for materials that I usually work with, metals, etc., setting it in the center slot is not sufficient. I actually have to go up a little bit. I usually go 1 or 2 notches. So you align the chuck, you put it in, line it up, snap it into the notch, and then what you do is you open these tines, right? And then you insert this and rotate the drill bit until the tines kind of grab onto it. Right, once the tines have grabbed a hold of it, right, then you can tighten down the chuck. Now, if you tighten down the material takeoff knob, right, that will actually adjust how far the drill bit is in or out, and that changes how much material is actually ground off. And you just pull this out. Now we're actually ready to start. So you can see what kind of shape the tip is. I've actually bench grinder sharpened this because I didn't have my Drill Doctor with me. I can get a cleaner edge without taking off so much material from the heel here. And I'll explain what that all means, as well as where a lot of people go wrong with the Drill Doctor in a little bit. I've changed the position here for better viewing. Power switch in the back here, you turn it on, and you're good to go. You insert this into the chuck, and you'll note that the chuck has a cam on either side. This helps maneuver the drill bit. And you just have to keep rotating this. You just have to keep rotating it until you stop hearing a grinding sound. So we're going to come back after that. So basically here at the end, and you'll hear very little grinding sounds. It's only a little bit on one side. Nope, that's it. Alright. So get the camera to focus on this. Alright, so you'll be able to now see the cutting edge is nice and sharp. It does feel very sharp. There's not a lot of heat inside the drill bit either. You know what? I can't get my camera to focus. Alright, so the chisel tip itself is actually quite wide, but one of the nice features of this model is that you can actually do split points with the side. Now the catch to doing that is that you actually have to then realign the drill bit after you've done your sharpening with the chuck aligned to the center mark, right? So it's realigned, and then now I'm just going to insert this sideways into here. You can see there's a little registration mark here on the side for one of the fins on the side of the chuck to line up with. And we just push it in and let the grinder do the work. Rotate it so we don't put too much heat into it. So now you can see how the point is actually split. So the cutting edges here, the cutting edge here and the cutting edge here are actually closer towards each other. Oh, I can't get it to focus on the tip. There we go. So the cutting edges are closer to each other with the split point, and now the drill bit's less likely to walk around on material. Alright, so that's how you sharpen a drill bit with the Drill Doctor. It's pretty easy. Now, why do people have such a differing range of opinions on the Drill Doctor? Well, for one, you do need to learn to be self-sufficient without this. The fundamental of how to sharpen a drill bit is still something you should know, how to do it on a bench grinder. Here's an example. Just have to grab an example from across the shop. If you use Deming bits, right, this is a 1-inch bit, it won't fit in a chuck like this. You can't sharpen it conventionally. You can sharpen it conventionally on a bench grinder, but you can't sharpen it with a Drill Doctor, right? However, for anything smaller, right, you end up saving money if you can sharpen your own drill bits instead of just buying new ones when they dull out. It's very good for putting an even profile on both sides of the chisel tip, where on a bench grinder you might make the drill a bit lopsided, and that way the wear happens on only one of the two cutting edges and the other one barely gets anywhere, right? So if you bench grind, sharpen, and eventually it gets really out of balance, then you may need to kind of touch it up with a Drill Doctor, and you actually end up taking away quite a bit of material. I guess one of the reasons why people don't like the Drill Doctor is because it is a little hard to use. I myself admit I had difficulties with this when I first got my Drill Doctor, and I acquiesced and finally read ye old instruction manual, and it actually said that you have to keep grinding until you stop hearing the grinding noises. It took me a while to figure out why, but it actually makes sense. And here's why. I have to draw it up to explain. So here's a drill bit. Let's put this in view. here's a drill bit, right? This is, if I just use something to point, this is the cutting edge, and this is the heel, right? The ratio of how high this cutting edge is relative to how low the heel is the relief angle, right? Positive relief is where the cutting edge is higher or closer to the material than the heel, right? A near zero relief angle is really useful for things like drilling in brass, where it's likely to catch and snap your drill bit off, or like acrylics, where you don't want it to take too much material out at a time, otherwise it's going to, you know, probably catch and snag and snap your acrylic. Regardless of which, it's a lot easier if you think of this as a cylinder and then unwrap the cylinder. So if we just unwrap it and turn it into almost like a lathe tool, right? This is the direction the drill bit's traveling in, right? It's not spinning, it's being dragged across the surface, and this is your workpiece up at the top, right? This drill bit surface is actually parallel to the workpiece, so there's very little cutting action that happens, and as time wears on, right, the front cutting edge gets impacted by the material being cut, and it actually wears away, and then suddenly you start to have a negative relief angle where the cutting edge is actually further away than the heel. That's why when a drill bit dulls out, all you get is friction and heat with no cutting, right? So what the drill doctor does is it actually takes away material. You can see this dotted line here is the material it wants to take away, right? Whereas this is a bit that's dulled out and flattened straight across. So this is what it's doing, but why do people have difficulty with it? So here it is enlarged, and I kind of get smaller as I go along, but bear with me. So here's our worn out cutting bit. It's parallel, flat to the top of the page. This dotted line is the material it wants to take away. The relief angle is exaggerated for clarity. Inside the drill doctor, right, is actually a cylindrical spinning diamond grinding wheel. That cylindrical wheel has a curved profile, so it starts to cut away, right? Even if you had a positive relief angle, as soon as the cutting edge starts to cut on this side, because it's always spinning in this direction, cutting towards the heel of the blade, right, it starts to cut this away, right? This curved line up here represents what it's cutting. Suddenly, this has become a negative relief angle drill bit, right? And the process continues. You start to cut and hog away more material. So now this dotted line of the desired cut is partially complete at the cutting edge, but the heel is still higher than the cutting edge. So this is what wears against your piece, and this part does nothing. You can't spin it around a couple times and assume it'll work. You actually need to, you know, complete the cut. So as you get closer and closer towards completion, right, the curve and the cutting, or sorry, the heel start to diminish until it hits the line of where it's supposed to be. I draw this dotted line really poorly as a circle just to kind of show the fact that there is a circular grinding wheel that's basically sweeping across the cutting edge to the heel, right? So if you stop prematurely, this is why you're going to get a problem, right? There are a couple of videos out there where people, where people will, you know, basically call the drill doctor a piece of crap because they didn't follow the instructions. The instructions simplify it, but this is what's actually going on. So if you think about it, right, you can't just stop prematurely. Regardless of that, it's nice to be able to burn through and sharpen a whole bunch of drill bits. And here's why. If you have an entire drawer full of drill bits, right, why would you throw these away instead of just resharpening them, right? Sure, they'll get a little shorter as you sharpen them each time, but the ability to actually resharpen things down to 1/16 inch, right, is actually kind of nice. Sure, you can bench grinder sharpen, you know, a 9/16 inch bit. You can do it maybe down to something less than 1/4 inch. But once you start to get towards, you know, something around 1/8 inch here, you're going to have issues with your hand getting in there and being able to see the relief angle on the tip of the drill bit, right? So, which one is this? 9/16, or 9/64 actually. So that's the Drill Doctor in a nutshell. It's good for maintaining drill bits that get a little bit dull, but I think it's really interesting. So that's the Drill Doctor in a nutshell. Having said all that, the Drill Doctor does actually work. It is an expensive option, but if you go through a lot of drill bits or machine hard materials, it's definitely something to consider, because bench grinding drill bits takes a lot of time and practice, and with larger drill bits it's kind of expensive if you make a mistake, right? Some mistakes you might not be able to recover from if you make a really bad decision and change the angle of the tip. Another nice feature is the ability to kind of dial in the relief angle. This plus and minus, right, I didn't explain earlier, but when you rotate the fin and notch it into plus, you increase the relief angle. When you dial it in towards minus, you actually decrease the relief angle. So if I wanted to make a set of drill bits for drilling through brass or acrylic, I'd make low relief angle ones, right? If I wanted for metals, I'd crank up the relief angle. So having said that, I still think it's a worthwhile investment for myself. It's not necessarily for everyone. Not everyone goes through the number of drill bits that I would. Not everyone would, you know, have the fortitude to sharpen, you know, 1-inch drill bits. But for what I need, for my purposes, it works out. So take that as you will. I mean, of all the videos out there, I think there are very few videos that actually give it justice. It either works and people don't go into it, or it doesn't work. Explaining the fundamentals hopefully has helped if you have a Drill Doctor, or if you don't, kind of pushes you over the fence either way, right? It's not vaporware, it does actually work. However, it is expensive. I can't remember how much I paid for it. I guess closing thoughts, they do sell a different grinding wheel instead of the normal diamond impregnated wheel. They sell one that's 100 grit that is better at hogging out large amounts of material when you're doing larger drill bits. But I mean, again, I've had it for a year and I've sharpened my drill bits dozens of times without actually wearing out the diamond wheel. So all in all, for high-speed steel drill bits, it's just fine. For cobalt, it would probably heat up a lot more. I'd probably want to keep like a little cup of water just to cool the drill bits off in, so I don't work hard on the surface or lose a temper either way. But if I were to go to carbide drill bits, I'd probably ruin the diamond surface on the cutting wheel. So yeah, that's my review of the Drill Doctor. Think of it as you will. If you like this video, please rate, comment, and subscribe.